Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone can be seated, the standing, and everyone coming in, please feel free to find your seats and be turning over and have your books ready. We're going to be starting on LP7A. That's the 7th chapter of the acceptance unit. And we're going to be going back and forth, if you have your character unit, just a little bit to try to pull into the pieces. Remember, with our units we're always building one step upon another, or one layer upon another, and that's the building blocks of character that we use in getting to the end result of trying to have true positive character and have the morals implied or implemented into our lives, and that bringing forth morality. Remember, morals are rules, and morality is the application of those rules, and we're going to talk about those tonight. Once again, being in the acceptance unit, which is the second of the 5 series of the junior high. And you can, once again, please feel free to download those books. Already get your mind set. If you haven't downloaded or don't have a copy of the self-control unit, we're just a few weeks away from that. So we'll put that up shortly within the next week, and you'll be able to download the self-control unit. So when we get started, you'll have your 3rd unit. And if you don't have one and you have access to getting one, I would order one. That way you have it. But if you don't, or if you're overseas or in a foreign country, we'll make it available so you can download them. And once again, they're available in English and in Spanish. So you'll just need to specify which one that you want. But looking here over to LP7A, of course, we're going to pick up where David left off as he concluded chapter 6, which is chapter 6 was building on the goals and having your goals, knowing what your goals are, and maintaining those goals. And of course, that built off of chapter 5, which was knowing your purpose. And we're going to put all that together with my choice and my future. You know, if you want to make history, all you got to do is look behind yourself. You know, every second determines our history with what we do. And we find that sometimes it's hard to change history. You know, even though it can be embarrassing, it can be frustrating, but the goal is to learn from our past, not just our past, but the past of society, and knowing things that won't work, knowing ideas that didn't produce positive results. And that doesn't mean that we need to go try it again to see, well, yeah, it didn't work the first time. Let's try the same thing again. We'll see if it works this time. You know, doing the same thing over and over and receiving the same negative result, as everyone knows, that's pretty much a definition of insanity. You can't expect it to become better unless you change something. Well, we see that in our society, and you always see on the news every year. Once again, we have school shootings, we have crime taking place as they have now, where they're going into stores. There are crime waves of multiple people going in and taking things very quickly and leaving the store. And everybody's still talking about these problems that if you research it or if you Google it, these situations have been going on for years and years, and we're still talking about them as though they're a new thing, that this just recently started. But no, these things have been going on for years. They're trends, so to speak. One thing leads to another, and then, of course, it builds up. And this time of year is always a time of, if you research Google, you'll find out it's a time of a lot of depression and a lot of theft, because everyone feels the need to compete to get that ultimate gift. And there's a lot of pressure put on people, especially in this time of year and this time of age, where you have COVID and you have supply disruptions, you have many people wanting and feeling that this is what I need to do, from peer pressure, conformity, and what society has put upon us, to where if we don't fulfill what we think is the right choice, we feel like we failed. And of course, that choice will determine our future. Every choice we make determines our future. And looking over here to LP7A, we're going to be tying a lot of things together with a note to the teacher. And once again, this is the grade tab pages that are only in the teacher's manual. So make sure when you get your self-control unit, if you order one, specifically ask for a teacher's manual. You're going to really need it in preparing to teach others. But it starts out by saying the decision-making process, that's the ability to gather facts, then decide on a course of action based on moral principles and integrity, is something we must train our children to do if they are to avoid those choices that lead to failure and embarrassment that lead failure and embrace those that lead to success. Where I was going with that is the embarrassment of what occurs when you don't and the things that can take place. Because let me reread that one more time, because this is something we all say, but it can sometimes escape us. Notice once again, the decision-making process, now that's supposed to be the ability to gather facts, not hearsay, not rumors, not gossip, not slanders, but facts. Gather the facts, the truth, and then decide on a course of action. So right there, from that first step, we realize that until you gather the facts, there's no way to start a course of action in dealing with something. So always remember that as you're trying to make decisions and to do things, be very careful not to rush to a judgment or rush to a decision. Be mindful of what you're doing and get the things that you need. And of course, this getting the facts could be something as simple as, a recipe someone gives you and you say, I think it was it 2 scoops of sugar or 2 scoops of salt? It had to be salt. I like salt. Well, after you put 2 scoops of salt in, you realize, it was sugar. Or it could be something very, very detrimental to someone. Imagine dealing with a student. And of course, here you have something that's taking place in the classroom, something that's broken. It could be the possibilities are endless when you involve children in situations. And getting children to learn that the right way to fix any situation is to be honest and to tell what is taking place and to solve matters through that means. Well, you can only imagine if a child is falsely accused of something, or an adult. We have people that are coming out of prison, it seems like it's always on the news, 27 years, 25 years, and they found out they were innocent this whole time. Think of what has been taken away from somebody, that the prison sentence of that magnitude. A lot of society says, well, we should give them money for the years we've taken from them. I would think that there's no amount of money that can replace taking someone's 27, 28 years. Mom died, father died, lost your opportunity of having a family. There's a lot of things in life that's very hard to replace, and money just doesn't fix problems. People might think that it fixes problems, but once they get it, they realize it didn't fix anything. Causes problems, but doesn't fix problems. That goes along with positive character and the managing of it. But once again, gathering these facts and showing children, if you deal with a situation, whether it be in a school, whether it be in a setting, anywhere, and we're talking about teachers and how to direct this with their choices, our choices as teachers, as we're overseeing a classroom, how we have to take the time to gather the facts. Imagine if you rush to a decision because a child tells you something, and then you find out the child possibly lied, wasn't very honest, but the child that did it thinks, I got by with that. I lied, and I got by with it. It's okay. Well, think of what we're teaching when we do things like that. Now, I'm not saying that you're always going to get to the bottom of the matter. That can be difficult, can consume your day, especially when dealing with young people. Sometimes they want to hold on thinking that telling the truth is the wrong thing. The snitches get stitches is what they say. And that's not true. Anybody that ever sees something take place and they see someone lie about it, you have to know, think of the result of the person that was lied about, the person that was false rumors said about them or things that were done to degrade them. Then on the other hand, what if a person actually did something? That should be dealt with in private. That's not something you show the whole classroom. If someone made a bad choice, it doesn't mean you need to ridicule that person to the end to where they suffer in front of everyone and everybody looks down on them. Because if everybody walks away calling someone a liar over one bad choice, well, then that's not going to be very beneficial to society either. We need to show people that if you make a bad choice, you can get past it. You can move forward. And with these decisions that we're making, notice it says they need to be based on moral principles and integrity. And if you remember, I printed off a couple copies here so we'd have them. Remember the character unit, and you can write that for your notes on page 8 of the character unit. remember we had the dividing line between right and wrong, and it was entitled Morals. What do they have to do with my character? And of course, we went through that, and we're going to read through it very briefly so we can bring back to mind and tying these things together, because we're using this term, moral principles, but really we explained it all on page 8. And that's where we were tying things together with explaining what these morals, these rules are, and how they apply to life, and how when morals are applied, that's morality. And it's very simple. When we look out in society and we say there's no morality, well, that's not true in a sense. There are rules, there's just no application of the rules. And the rules are kind of done away with. You know, there's no acknowledging that these rules here are what we need to apply to keep us safe. And that can be seen from someone running a stop sign to watching people go into stores on the camera and stealing things. It's obvious rules are broken, but it didn't start there. That's the result of something that broke down long before that. And that's what we see even taking place in the Supreme Court right now, to where they're arguing over abortion, Roe versus Wade and Roe versus Case, with the decisions being made where they're contemplating and pondering if they possibly made the wrong decision. But as the peaceful solution is always challenged, the choice of abortion is not where it first went wrong. There were choices made before that that lead to people suffering and things taking place. But of course, in society, you have a hard time of getting people to decide when life starts and when it ends. But I think the author of The Peaceful Solution said it best: if it's not alive, why do you have to kill it? If it's not alive, why do you have to terminate it? Well, of course, people are fighting for choices, and everybody has the right to make a choice. But remember, just imagine in society, if we treated each other like that, living beings, and he didn't really fit my life anymore, I'd like to terminate him. Let's go ahead and terminate him. Well, what takes place in society when someone does that? It takes place every day. And someone terminates someone. We call that murder. And then people, they go to court, they're put on trial, and then they are sentenced. And we say, well, wait a minute. Now, women have choices toward their bodies, and I agree with that 100%. Everyone has a choice. Everyone. Well, it's not a living being. Well, okay, we take that, but then explain the Scott Peterson case, which is back in the news again. Why was he charged with 2 murders when he killed his pregnant wife? Is it alive or is it not alive? How can we charge someone like that and say, well, this day it was, this day it's not? It's very confusing. And that's what creates society to where, well, you have no morality because no one really knows what the rule is. We kind of change it here and there to fit the need of the day. And it's really sad, because think of what that does to the mind of not just, as we spoke about, children, now we're talking about adults. And they're trying to make decisions, and, well, is it or is it not? You know, you can find cases online where people have hit others drunk driving, and they hit pregnant women, and they charge them with 2 counts of manslaughter because it killed the woman and the child. Well, if it's not alive, or is it alive? Well, when was it alive? When's it going to end? When does it start? Well, you know, if we have laws charging people for children in the womb and saying that it's murder, then why is it not murder when someone goes to end the life at a doctor's office? It's a choice, but what's the morality? What's the rule to that? And why are we even doing that to begin with? Well, think about that as I briefly read back over page 8 here. It says, morals, what do they have to do with my character? And once again, this is out of the character unit, the chapter 1. And it says, regardless of culture, religion, or environment, there are some values that all people share. Remember, a value is something that you deem to be important. Well, they're called moral values, and those moral values, if you remember those, the morals are rules, and the value is how much you consider that rule to be important. Well, a moral value is like a line that divides wrong behavior from right behavior. People from all walks of life, young or old, big or small, rich or poor, share some of the same basic concepts of moral value, and that's between what is right and what is wrong. And if you remember, we divided morality into 3 basic categories, and they were behavior and attitude towards all life, human, animal, and plant. behavior and attitude towards possession and property, and then behavior and attitude towards the environment. And we went on to say that moral principles in regards to human life means acknowledging and accepting. That's very important. Moral principles in regards to human life means acknowledging and accepting that life is valuable and all people have the potential to contribute to society. Could you imagine if you had to answer for my mistakes or I have to answer for yours? Doesn't seem fair, does it? That if someone makes a bad choice, we have to suffer. We think about that whenever something is done. I remember when TSA first came out, when you go to the airport after 9/11. People were appalled at what they had to go through, and people are still appalled with what they have to go through when just boarding a plane. Well, it was put into action, and all of society was put into this kind of chain of command, so to speak, that took place, and it's supposed to be for our safety, to prevent people from dying. Well, if you're creating something to help protect life, that's one thing. So once again, I challenge, consider what sits at the Supreme Court, and can you honestly say that the principles that are being used there regard all human life and acknowledging and accepting that it has value? Because when you have something and you terminate it, that pretty much says it doesn't have value. But once again, don't lose track of what we're talking about, what we're thinking about here, about my choice and my future, because some people never get a future because of someone else's choice. And that's something when we're talking about teenagers here, there's a lot of teens that seek, after making bad choices, they end up in a very sad situation, but it didn't start with the pregnancy. And that's what that's just one example. It didn't start with that, but that's kind of the most predominant thing. And then once they're pregnant, the rule changes from one situation to another, as we use where they're saying that it's not a life that can be terminated, but yet in this case, people are charged with 2 murders when a pregnant woman dies. Well, it doesn't seem like that makes very much sense when you're trying to teach that rules are important and we need to adhere to all rules. But notice it also says when you have a moral attitude toward others, you accept and appreciate that they have the right to live in peace, safety, and security. You can demonstrate a moral attitude by being respectful towards all people. That means not taking advantage of others, but rather showing them care and concern. Now, an immoral attitude towards life consists of behaviors that devalue, belittle, hurt, and take from others emotionally and physically. Behaviors that include name-calling, teasing, bullying, discriminating, cause others to feel inferior and disregard their worth as human beings. Well, once again, I don't think I have to keep painting the picture of how certain things are disregarded as worthless whenever things are done to just terminate. Well, physical hurt and others include being aggressive and violent towards them. It also consists of behaviors such as violating, as in rape, killing, kidnapping, and murdering. And when you see this here, it says, the author put down at the bottom, it's very important when tying this together. It says, those who have an immoral attitude towards human life often direct acts of cruelty toward those who are weaker or unable to defend themselves. Weaker or unable to defend themselves. That takes place with children. You also see that take place with the elderly. That's very common. You see it on the news with elderly abuse. But when we see these things take place, we know that something's just not right. And along with moral principles, here on back to LP 7A, we also seen integrity. And once again, integrity, we went over that in the character unit also. It was page 18. And the definition of integrity was the end result of internalizing positive characteristics, character traits that can be clearly seen in your actions and your attitude. And when you do that, you're recognized as a person of integrity. And that's what it means to have integrity, that you're making the right choice. You're practicing, as the VIP section of the character unit told us, to value, to imitate, and to practice. And to practice. That causes things to become a habit. when we do them. If we're only part-time doing it, then we won't do very well. If you practice using positive character 8 hours of the day and negative character 8 hours of the day, and well, I had to sleep the other 8, well, you're not going to have a very positive attitude. You're not going to have a very positive character, and it's not going to have a very great outcome in the end. Well, going back here to LP 7A, once again, there in the first paragraph, it says, life, after all, is about choices. Every choice we make reflects who we are, what we believe in, what we will stand for, and what we will fall for. And it's very easy for us as adults. So imagine children, as we'll discuss more tonight, how easy it is for them to fall for something. You know, here, as we talked about in the character units, here, sniff this glue. It'll get you high. It's great for you. You'll like it. Or here, smoke this. Or here, drink this. Or here, do this. Here, try that. Well, it won't kill you. I did it, and I'm doing just fine. I'm doing okay. Really? Well, what possessed you to want to sniff glue and determine that was okay? You know, that lets you know there's something wrong when somebody's doing something like that. Obviously, there's something that's not okay. If someone tries to get you to do something that could harm yourself, or bring harm to someone else, it doesn't take rocket science to figure that's not okay. You know, there were times when it used to be pretty common, it's kind of died off, but when you see bridges down south, speaking of the East Coast, a lot of times now you see bridges, a lot of people don't understand. Here in Texas, we don't have many of them, but you'll see fences on the sides of the bridges, and they'll go up and they'll kind of go over. And a lot of people wonder, well, why was the money spent to put fences on bridges? Well, it was because of some incidents where people, young teenagers, thought it would be fun to take large rocks and throw them at cars as they were going down the interstate. And there was a trend there at one time where there was quite a few people killed very quickly in a short amount of time because it became something everybody was trying to do. Well, not everybody, but a large group were trying to do it in different places, and they realized that it was something that became trendy. Children were trying to do it. They didn't realize the devastation of it until after, imagine someone driving down the road 70 miles an hour and here a huge rock comes through the windshield. That can be extremely devastating. And once you make that choice to do it, you can't take it back. Once you make a choice that affects somebody or hurts somebody, you can't take it back. You know, I had a man I was doing business with one time, and he was telling me on how he was in the lumber business, and he milled lumber. And he was telling me, he goes, you know, I've worked on these saws, and I've worked on these saws, and, you know, I can do this in my sleep. He said, then one day I came in, first 10 minutes I was working. He said, didn't think anything about it, went right to work. And then he picked up his hand, and it was like, well, it's kind of like this. It was all gone, except for one finger. He had this finger and this thumb. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean? He said, I came to work one day, and within 10 minutes I was here, had my gloves on, ran my hand, ran it right through the saw. You know, and he was talking about his choice, and you could tell he was still troubled by it, you know, because he was telling me that. He said, you know, they always hurt. I'm like, the fingers you cut off? He goes, yeah, they always hurt. He goes, you ever tried to rub something that hurts and it's not there? And I could actually see the pain that he was talking about. And you could see what he would like to go back and have that day over again, because it was a job that he said he knew how to do really well, and he'd been doing it for a while. But one day, 10 minutes into the job, he wasn't paying 100% attention, and he made a bad choice, and there's nothing he can do to change it. You know, because I asked him, I said, did they try to put him back on? He said they did. They did, a couple of them. He said, but they hurt so bad. He said, I couldn't even use them, so they took him back off. But you could see the misery that he was going. Young man, he probably in his middle 30s, but once again, he knew the benefit of having all of his fingers, and now he's going through the devastation of only having two on one hand. And you think about that, and I'm sure he would like to have that to do over again. I'm sure there's a lot of people, if you've ever sat in courts or been to juvenile facilities or been to prisons, There's a lot of people that would like to have an opportunity to do something over again, to take something back, to redo the wrong that they committed. We don't always get to do that. It's not like when you paint the room blue and you think, I should have painted it gray, and then you paint it over again. You know, it's not like that. This is a choice of life and death. This is a choice of children seeing how beneficial they can be to society, or children developing a worth to where, you know, they add to the suicide statistics that are always increasing with our youth. It can be very devastating. But once again here, it says the choices we make, this is the last sentence of the first paragraph, the choices we make determine whether we accept our lives and the lives of others as worthwhile, and how we interact with one another, and how we achieve our goals and purpose. And remember, achieving our goals and purpose, that's the last two chapters that we went through and talking about our goals and our purpose. And very quickly, turn back over to page 87 so we can get this in our minds also. Page 87. And that started chapter 5 with there's a purpose to it all. And if you notice here in the very first paragraph, we covered this in detail, and it said to have purpose in life means to have a positive direction in which to grow and mature. Knowing your purpose helps you to know what you want to do with your life. You know, and once again, it says, how can you tell if there's a purpose in someone's life? Well, look to see if they're motivated and determined to accomplish things. You know, have you ever went down the road, or you've ever seen something and you think, what in the world, what purpose does that serve? You know, it doesn't make any sense. And then sometimes you'll see on the internet, they'll have, did you know what these were created for? You know, I think the one that, one that amazed me one time was the drink cans. It's got the little hole in it when you pop open the drink can. I must have been, I don't know, 40 before I realized you're supposed to spin it around to put your straw through it so it holds your straw. So that was technology that I didn't know. Very simple, but you'll always find things that you wonder, well, why was that done that way? And you'll find they have purposes. I've learned a lot about tape measures and the purposes that they have, and if you don't know what it is, it just seems like it's out of place. But there's a purpose to many things in life, and once you know the purpose to using something, well, it becomes beneficial to you. But if we don't educate ourselves to know the purpose and what they're for, we never get the full benefit of it. And that's also ourselves. We have huge potential as society. Our students have huge potential to contribute to society. But as teachers to those students, that depends, as the author of the Peaceful Solution stated in the intro to the book, we put a lot of faith and trust into the teachers when we give our students to them to instruct and guide them, because that's really we are the ones using this knowledge that we've been given to help put into their minds so they can see what the purpose is, and there's a purpose to suffering also we'll get into. There's a reason for it. And it's not an enjoyable thing, but it lets us know that something's not right. And when, we brought that up in a school one time, and a student said, you're telling me that suffering is beneficial. And I said, well, what if you stuck your hand in a fire and you couldn't feel the pain that it was burning? Would you know that it's not beneficial to have your hand in the fire and that you're actually suffering? When our body hurts, when the nerves let us know something's wrong, it lets us know that, hey, we need to stop. You're doing something that's not beneficial to your body. Well, when society suffers and it hurts, we as society should go, we're doing something wrong, we need to stop. Well, society is not as quick to do that as individuals are. Individuals are more prone to not want to hurt themselves in most cases. Well, society, we tend to want to blame someone else. Well, it would be better if they didn't do this, or he didn't do that, or she didn't do that, or we get into Democrat, Republican, or we get into nationalities. If they wouldn't do this, we wouldn't do that. And we get to the point to where everybody finds its success, and our country is successful because now we have a nuclear bomb. That's the choice we made. What occurs when someone makes the choice to launch a nuclear bomb? All society gets to answer for it, right? Whether you agreed with it or not, we all live on this planet together. You're not going to be able to get with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos and get on a spaceship and disappear for a couple minutes and come back. You're going to come back to something that's horrible. You're not going to get away very far, and that's sometimes you tend to wonder if people aren't inspired to create this ideal of escaping Earth because they see how bad it's getting and where it's going. And the only way to be safe is to escape it. That's what it seems like some people feel that way. But once again, so we covered what a purpose is and how we need to strive for that purpose. And then turn back over to page 109, which was chapter 6, which is reaching for your goals, or reach for your goals. So we talked about a purpose, and now here's the goals. It says, did you know that you have been achieving goals since birth? Now, a goal is an end that you strive to attain. And, goals can be positive and goals can be negative. But goals that have a purpose when contributing to a positive outcome, those are positive. Negative goals, well, I'm on the low totem pole as a drug dealer, but one day I want to be the top guy. Well, what's the purpose? To make lots of money. But it hurts people. You're destroying lives. So therefore your goal's not positive. Now, if you started working in a company and you want to work your way through the ranks and get up to a position of, CEO or whatever your dream is to be, and you do it through an honest manner, that's a positive goal. Then you achieved it as long as the company is not doing something that's detrimental to society. I can think of a few companies right now in the news every day that's not beneficial to society, but yet they're stair-stepping their way up the totem pole, so to speak. But once again, these goals that we're achieving and this purpose that we're having are things that we need to put together, and the end result should be positive because this purpose that we find, these goals that we set, remember we write these goals down to achieve them, and we'll go back through that more as we proceed through chapter 7, but they need to have positive results in the end. And if you're a young person and you're thinking, well, I know I have purpose, but I don't know what it is, that's pretty common in school. Ask someone, what do you want to be when you grow up? I really don't know. I've been to colleges, people 4 years into colleges. So what are you going to do when you get out of college? I really don't know yet. You're running out of time. You're spending a lot of money on education. You probably need to decide pretty quick what you want to do. McDonald's is pretty full right now. Not everybody gets to work there. And that's where a lot of people end up with college degrees right now because they don't think it through. They don't consider what they're doing. They have the same goal as 10 other people, and there's only five openings for those jobs. So that becomes very difficult to make it all come together. But here back to LP 7A, it says, as adults, we sometimes question our own ability to choose correctly and make sound decisions. And that's very common, and that's true. And that's why even as instructors of the Peaceful Solution, we're always talking with each other teachers who have been going through this program for years and discussing situations, discussing matters, educating ourselves continually because there's always something that can be said to help us. There's always something that can be shared in a classroom setting that improves our decision making and our ability to make better decisions and achieving our goals. But in thinking about how difficult it is for adults, look what it says here about children. Well, how much more difficult is it, or it must be, for our children to consistently make moral choices, especially in today's society? And when you think about the experience that we have as adults, for those adults that are in here, compared to you have some youth sitting over here that are 7, 8, 9 years old. Well, that doesn't mean our experiences have all been great. If you're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, I'm sure we could share a lot of things that this is what you don't do. In fact, I remember hearing an older gentleman tell me one time, he said, man, I could write a book on life about choices, and it would be this is what not to do. Now, making a right choice, well, I could probably write a small brochure on that, but I could write a whole book on what not to do because I pretty much did it. And that's something, and I listened very carefully because I wanted to hear some more about, well, I don't want to know the details about what you did, but I'd like to know what's the results of what you did. Because knowing the results can deter someone from making a bad choice. If you took, and I seen this done in North Carolina one time, and I thought, I was just getting into the Peaceful Solution. I was still living in North Carolina. And they were trying to get through the minds of people that had dogs and cats to get them spayed or neutered was what they were trying to do. So they televised a news reporter holding a dog as they put it to sleep, as they put it to death. And I thought to myself, I wonder how that would be if you took a young lady or a young man who fathered the child. I'm never going to put the young ladies out there by themselves. It takes two. And let them hold the fetus in their hands as it dies or as it rips it apart. Or if you could actually take, after that's done, if we could actually take and show them, okay, this is a choice you made to terminate it. This is what this child could have become 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. This is what you removed from society. And some people say, well, that's kind of a hypothetical thing. Well, no, when I was young, I remember being a father very young, and I remember at 18, and I remember the one that was kind of leading me in my career furniture business offered to pay for an abortion and told me repeatedly, this is what you need to do. But in my mind, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And that was 29 years ago. And I look every day and I think, that's something that could have been terminated. But you see the results of not making that wrong choice. Well, it all comes by influences, and it comes sometimes from those who you respect that are teaching you how to have a great career, but that doesn't mean that they know the best decisions when it comes to morality. It doesn't mean that you need to build your career here. That's what you need to focus on. You shouldn't do that, with a child. You should eliminate that out of your life. And when you think about that, you think, why? Why can't I not do it with a child? Or two or three or four or five or six or seven or eight or nine? Why can't I? And then I met the author of The Peaceful Solution, and he showed me that you can do anything you want to if you set your mind to it, and you can be successful if you set your mind to it. Just be honest in everything you do. And I'm very thankful that I had a role model in one instance, but then when I realized that, when it comes to everyday human life, this guy's not too sharp. Very sharp in the furniture industry, very knowledgeable about how to make corporations work. And I kind of, after that dealing and his suggestion, we went our separate ways. I just couldn't find myself finding any value in his advice after that. And that was a choice I made. And I don't regret making the choice I made, but I think if I had to follow through with his idea, I would have regretted that every day. So I'm glad I didn't. And I think there's a lot of people out there, if someone would take and let them see what coulda, shoulda, woulda, instead of just do it and get it out of your mind. You won't even think about it a year from now. It'll all be over. It's all in the way it's presented. And it's all in the way, everyone has a goal. And everyone has a purpose. Sometimes the purpose is to make money off of bad choices. And if that's what a person's business is to make money off of bad choices, then you're not really helping someone plan a family. Even though you can call yourself that, that's not what you're doing. You're helping people destroy a family. But continuing on here with our children, and we think about these decisions they make, notice it says, although our world continues to advance technologically, social ills are advancing quicker. Those who are caught in the crossfire of the wars on drugs, the wars on crime, and the sexual revolution are the youngest and most impressible members of our society, our children. You think about what we see even today. It was being discussed on Capitol Hill about the detriment of social media, such as Facebook and Instagram. Well, that didn't exist when we wrote this book. But now you see where, and I've never really been on Instagram, so I don't really know much about it. But I thought it was interesting when I was listening on the news today that they suggest that you have 2 accounts. Then I thought, why would you need 2 if you have one? What do you need the other one for? And it was suggesting that there's one for your parents to see and there's one for your friends to see. I thought, well, that's not teaching someone positive, because if your parents can't see it, or you don't want your parents to see it, obviously you're doing something that your parents are teaching you should not be doing. So if you're teaching me that I should be doing it, are you actually a positive role model? And then they're actually discussing now to where there'll be warnings come up so people won't spend 8 and 9 hours a day on social media. You know, and you think about this, what do you think a child does if they're not on social media? Do you think they're really in the books, or do you think they're playing video games or running around with their friends? You know, how much is put on education, and what are we doing as teachers to give them direction? And then not to forget, as we just read, the drugs that come forth, the sexual revolution as children grow and they mature, and then they see these role models that, you know, get married today, divorce next week. They move along, but you don't see the results of these decisions. Later on in life you see them, but young people don't see them readily available. You see movie stars, you see role models, sports athletes, they all seem to be enjoying life, making lots of money. You know, and that's what everybody wants to do. That's how we find success. But as we get into this, we'll find out, and we'll discuss in the next couple of classes, success is truly measured by the positive results we bring into society, by the benefit we contribute to society. There's no monetary value that can be measured on that. Even though we would all save money if we eliminated theft, if we eliminated war, we could produce a lot of money. When you think about the money that's spent on war alone, if you've never looked that up, look up the money that's spent on war and think about what our society could be like if we would just invest that into the education of our children and how to conduct themselves. Now, we would be so much better off in creating society that is based upon making the right choice. But here, continuing on, it says, from this precarious place, our adolescents must make choices regarding their physical and mental well-being and ultimately their future. Well, in this lesson here in chapter 7, these are some of the things we're going to cover. One is understand the importance of differentiating between a wise moral choice and one that might scar them for life. So one that has some wisdom. In other words, taking that knowledge you've learned and putting it to play. That's wisdom. Explore ways that making negative choices can affect their lives and gather problem-solving skills to assist them in avoiding such choices. So problem-solving skills. So not running from a problem, not putting a Band-Aid on a problem, but truly finding out it's broke, this is how you fix it. Or it's breaking, this is how you prevent it, which is very important also. And also appreciate that positive problem-solving and decision-making must include the use of moral values and integrity. And once again, those moral values, those rules that we apply, and that becomes morality when the rules are applied. And the integrity, that's the internalization, of that character. And once again, you can find that if you want to put a note in your book there for values. For moral values, you have page 6 and 8. You have values on page 6 of the character unit, and of course the moral value and that dividing line between right and wrong is on page 8 of the character unit. And then you have page 18 for the definition of integrity, which is that huge word going across the page there, telling us that it's the end result of the internalization of positive character. Well, once again, it says, because of the use of this morals and integrity, or because their choices determine the acceptance of themselves and others. So once again, reading that last bullet point in its completeness, appreciating that positive problem solving and decision making must include the use of moral values and integrity because their choices determine acceptance of themselves and others. And we tend to think that everyone accepts themselves. Think about yourself when you were a teenager, or if you are a teenager, if you're not even a teenager yet. But think about that one thing that you just fought with yourself because you didn't seem like you fit in. One thing that you find with speaking with people, everybody had that one thing. And now when you grow up, it's like, who cares? I remember when I was in school, I really wanted to comb my hair. I was always worried about my hair. Today, I don't really care anymore. I don't really have much anymore. I trim it close. But boy, I was all worried about it back then. I think I was the only one worried about it, and I had a natural cowlick in the back that stuck out. Couldn't figure out what to do with that. And I was probably the only one that really noticed that stuff. And as you get older, you realize, these are really simplistic things. Life is a lot more complicated than cowlicks and your hair not in the right spot. Life is a lot more complicated than that. So it's not that, presenting yourself isn't a proper thing to do. You wouldn't want to, come out in front of a group of people and, I don't want to mention world leaders that come out looking like they haven't combed their hair, but it doesn't seem very presentable. It's kind of hard to take someone serious that looks like they just got out of bed every time you see them. And I'm not trying to degrade anybody. I know there's trends that take place in society to where that's kind of a trend right now. Your uncombed hair is supposed to be fashionable. It might be fashionable, but it's not very presentable in certain instances. Well, looking over here to the lesson plan, my choice and my future. Well, our purpose and objective, remember, students will learn that the choices they make today will affect their future. Students will also practice making sensible choices. One thing that we use here in the Peaceful Solution with our young students, we want them to see how some choices truly can change things to the point you can grow things. And one of the things we have them do is to plant things. And they get to see, as they plant it, they get to see it go through the stages of growing. And then after it grows to its completeness, they get to eat it and enjoy it. And that's part of realizing that no, watermelons don't grow at the grocery store. They actually grow in a field, or cantaloupes, or cucumbers. But it teaches them that, this is how things work. If you don't take care of it, you don't get to enjoy the watermelon. You don't get to enjoy the cucumber. But that's just one way in teaching youth how to realize that there's some things, you have a purpose, you set a goal, and then you work at it, and you have to maintain it. And we'll get into that maintaining goals, because if you don't get the benefits of what you first set out to do. It all falls apart around you. And that's just one thing. You can think of other things for your students. As teachers, not everyone, I know when we went to Chicago, big city, they actually had suburban gardens there. And that was very interesting how they tore a house down and they were returning the facility there where it had been torn down, house removed. It was, the house was condemned. It was falling apart. So they were teaching the children how to return it back to a very, spacious, flowers, grass. And, that makes a lot of sense when you live in a suburban area. And the children would come there and they would all help participate. Sometimes they take and they have areas where there's a lot of trash and they clean it up and they see the benefit of what it looks like clean. They find out maintaining it's not that great. When you have people that don't care, they'll trash it right back up. But students get to see these things, and you want to make it real to students. It's hard for a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old to see what a 50-year-old sees, because there's so much more experience in that life. Well, if you want them to see it, we have to do things to get it in their mind. We have to paint those pictures in their mind. You don't want to wait for them to be 45 before they go, oh, that's what he was talking about. Now I know. Now I know because I did it wrong myself. Well, that's what we're trying to prevent in society. But here in the procedure, starting with verse 1, it says, review the previous lesson entitled Reach for Your Goals by asking students the following question. And this is where you want to engage your students. You want to get feedback. You want to be serious, but you also want to make sure, as a teacher, you're guiding this back to discussions you had in the book. Because, you ask a student what are some benefits of setting positive moral goals, you'll get some answers. But you want to see how much they can tie it back to what the book said and how much they're connecting these things. And of course, here in the italicized area, you'll see some ideal answers that we present to teachers that would come forth from our text. And it says, answers will vary, but should include a positive goal will help you to accomplish your task. It can help you to achieve your purpose. And if you look back over, and I know David just covered this last class with what I have learned, but let's look back over real quick to pages 109, 110, and 113, just really quickly. And if you look down at the bottom of page 109, just to kind of, you can read through it, but just briefly looking through the bottom here, it says positive moral goals. This is the third line up. Positive moral goals, especially those related to development of moral character, will help you to resist negative peer pressure and will keep you focused on making choices that will benefit you and others. Well, that's some of the positive, outcomes of setting a moral goal. And looking over to the next page would be a goal setter. Looking here at the last paragraph, it says, in addition to setting goals to fulfill your purpose in life, you can set goals to better yourself. And when we better ourselves, everyone around us benefits from that. So when we become a more honest person, when we become a more responsible person, a more patient person, when we add these positive character traits to our life, everyone around us benefits from those things. And then looking over to page 113 really quickly with what the difference is. Remember, we had the positive and the negative goals. Well, you get to see, well, this is the benefit if you do it, and this is the consequence if you don't. And notice at the very top of the page, once again, it said, although there are many different types of goals, most goals can be categorized as either positive or negative. A moral positive goal is beneficial, notice, for yourself and others. And it's very important that children understand and that adults understand that a positive moral goal just doesn't benefit you, it benefits everyone around you. It strengthens and motivates you to succeed and will build a moral character. But notice once again, a negative and immoral goal is not advantageous, healthy, or beneficial. If it is achieved, it could result in harm to yourself and others. And you want to make sure that what are some benefits of setting positive goals? Make sure they remember what a negative goal is. Because sometimes positive goals are set with, well, I get a nice job, flashy car, big house. I get to do what I want to do. I retire at 23 because I worked so hard from 20 to 23 and made all the money I could, still living home with mom and dad. But that's success. Some people believe that, but that's not success. That's not success at all. And then going back here to page LP7C, and B, in procedure 1. It says, what are some ways you can manage your goals? What are some ways you can manage your goals? And, of course, some answers that will vary, but they could include setting realistic goals, being resourceful, responsible, and accountable for your actions, being organized and prioritizing where needed, and using your positive moral character traits to achieve your goals. Well, for your notes there, you can write down page 116, which is the section entitled Being Realistic. And I'll read to you the first paragraph there on page 116. It says, now that you know the importance of setting goals that are positive, the next step is to be realistic about the goals you set. Realistic means to be sensible and practical. In other words, you get your job at 20 and I'll retire when I'm 23. Well, that's not being, you can do that as long as you want to retire broke and your mom and dad continue to keep you up, which is not being very responsible. But you won't retire for long because your parents won't put up with that very much, I'm sure. But the realistic goals will be, I would like to save to buy a bicycle or a car, or I would like to save to buy a new outfit or something that's within our price range as a youth. Raking leaves, my goal was to buy a candy bar. That's pretty much what I came to. A candy bar and a soda. And if I got that, man, I thought I was the most successful child. It was in the whole state of North Carolina. And I would work. Now that I'm an adult, I truly think back, I used to rake leaves for like 5 hours just to go buy a candy bar and a drink that I would eat and drink in 5 minutes. Doesn't make too much business sense now that I think about it, but it sure seemed great when I was younger. And that was success to me. But also turning over to page 121, you have here that goal maintenance requires character. And reading the very top here, it says, once you have decided on what your goals are, positive goals, and have written them down, very important, people who accomplish their goals write them down. the next step is start putting your ideas into practice. And of course, these ideas that you use are ideas that have been proven to be effective. Now, people create things and invent things all the time, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel when making the right choice. That's already been proven. We have thousands of years in society that shows what works and what doesn't work. And the sad part about society, we tend to resort back to what doesn't work and think this time it will work. They did it, but now let me try it. I'm going to do it and I'll show you it works. And they try it and it doesn't work. And it never ceases to amaze us as a society when people fail, but you tend to think, well, what's causing this regurgitation of ignorance? We call it recidivism in prison. Why do people keep going around? And we'll look at recidivism and think, why would someone go back to prison after they got out? They know how bad it is. Why would they go back? Well, we as society are caught up in our own recidivism of ignorance sometimes, to where we do the wrong thing and then we turn around and do it again. And then we'll turn around and do it again. It never ceases to end. And, well, there's a lot of examples you could bring, but we should individualize those things with ourselves and what we're doing. And how if we do something and it's wrong, well, why go do it again and expect a different result? It just doesn't make sense to keep doing it, and it's not being responsible, and it's not setting positive, realistic goals in doing that. So looking here down to procedure two, and think about, as we read this, and as students, with the technological differences that exist today compared to, think 100 years ago. If you ever get an opportunity, I used to love doing this. And when I was in school, very different now. When I was in school, all of my teachers that I had were about the age of my grandmother. And they were very interesting because all of my teachers were raised back in the Great Depression. They knew what it was like to go through not having anything. And they could tell some really interesting stories that really got you to thinking, because when I was growing up, that's when the cell phone thing was coming. If you had a cell phone, man, you were something else. And not many people had a cell phone back then. Back then, if you had a pager, you were something else. And you could ask students today what a pager is, they wouldn't have a clue. But boy, we thought that was something else. But I always thought it was funny that if you had a pager, it was worthless unless you had a phone. You kind of needed a phone for your pager. So if you found success of having a pager but you didn't have a phone, well, your pager didn't work until you called the number back, find out what they wanted. And, you think about how society has advanced so much to computers. Now, that was successful if you had a computer. And in today, these things right here do more than what computers did when I was in school. We had the dot matrix system with the original Macintosh computers that I knew of, and they were very blah. And now today, you can put so much information just on a small card. Well, that's pretty decent. But when you think about the human mind, as we've covered before in the Peaceful Solution, can hold so much more than any computer we've created, is better than making decisions that computers that are generating. And there's computers that the author of the Peaceful Solution even explained about, these mega computers that are supposed to help make sensible decisions. Well, someone needs to ask the computer, why are we doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results? The computer should have figured that out by now, right? Well, obviously, we as human beings need to start taking control of our own life. But looking here to procedure 2, we'll read it and we'll turn over, but we'll get started in it next class. But it says we're going to inform students that in this lesson, they will learn the choices they make today can have a profound impact on their lives. Have students turn to page 131 in their handbooks and read the introduction, emphasizing that a choice made today can either have a positive or negative effect on their futures. And that's something you can't escape, is your future. It's always going to come. It's kind of like your past. Your past is what you make of it, and your future, of course, is always waiting for your next choice to determine what your past will be. And that's truly how our history is laid out for mankind. We can look back and see a lot of detrimental things that took place in society. You still see things with with the Emmett Till case. They just made a ruling on here not long ago. If you've never read the story of Emmett Till, you should read the story of Emmett Till. We speak about it in the Peaceful Solution, how someone lost their life over whether it be accusation or true. Read the story of Emmett Till and then decide, does anyone deserve to be beaten to death like that? Whether they whistled at a woman or not, did they really deserve to be mutilated that way? Well, as a society, we're still trying to decide whether it was okay or not, or whether someone should be held accountable or not. That's the confusion that society still to this day looks back. A young man that did something back in the 40s or 50s, and they still look back and they really still can't figure it out, and what's taking place. Well, we're going to get started here in Chapter 7 with my choices and my future, the introduction with our next class. But go over again, as teachers, go back over with the Chapter 5 of knowing your purpose and then reaching for your goals in Chapter 6, because we're going to start putting a lot of things together because our purpose and our goals help create our choices. And our choices are what we have to live with. So our next class, once again, will be an easy date to remember. It will be on 12/12. That should be very simple to remember. 12/12. It'll be this coming Sunday at 5:30. So thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.